a little bit more about this. Is this a trend, or is this just simply happenstance that all of these issues are happening at the same time? We're joined by Hetal Dalal, President and Chief Operating Officer at Institutional Investor Advisory Services, and Sandeep Parekh, who is founder at Finsec Law Advisors. Thank you so much to the two of you for joining in. Hetal, I will start with you because IiAS particularly, I think, has been in the spotlight, if I can say that, in that the advice that you've been giving out to investors has been taken up more and more nowadays, and you've seen a number of incidents. According to you, is this something that you can say is a shift in the way that India Inc. will have to operate in the listed space, or do you think it's too early to say that?
No, I think we are seeing a trend where the pushback from investors has been increasing. Over the years, what's happened when you look at the trajectory of just shareholder voting, right? From simply saying I'm doing a check the box exercise, I think asset managers have become far more thoughtful in terms of how they're voting on these shareholder resolutions. So over a period of time, we're actually seeing the entire asset management community. You talk about mutual funds, you talk about insurance companies, pension funds, some of the AIFs, all of them becoming far more thoughtful and actually giving the required pushback to boards. So I don't think this is a one-off. I do see this as a trend, and we see that in voting patterns as well, right? Not just in terms of how many investors or how many votes are cast against, but more from the context of simply saying that the amount of capital which is getting voted upon is significantly high. So overall, I think this is a trend which is here to stay. I don't think this is a one-off sort of issue.
Sandeep, do comment on this in that, particularly, for example, okay, I would understand if you can't comment on specific cases, but if I were to talk about Z, for example, and the fact that an EGM has been called, there are questions in terms of legality that will come up increasingly. Do you think that that's something that is going to be more common now? You can have a lot more legal battles where large institutional shareholders come to loggerheads, say, with the board of directors?
I would think so, and I don't, as Hetal said, this is certainly not a one-off, and I think we've been seeing this trend for the past several years. If you remember the Coal India letters, which had gone, so I think three significant things are occurring, and I think each of them has a very significant impact on these kind of actions. One is, I think, institutional investors are buying more shares, really. So they have more stake. They have a louder voice compared to retail people. So, that's been one kind of, it's a very gradual trend, but it's happening. And the second is, I think, institutional shareholders are kind of waking up and kind of becoming much more vociferous. So it's kind of a cultural shift for the institutional shareholders, both domestic and foreign. And lastly, I think people are scared of Hetal, right? So, and the proxy advisors have really made a big difference to how people look at ease of kind of raising a protest, because they have ready-made stuff in terms of the data being analyzed into more digestible form. Because when you're looking at 4,000 companies, or even 1,000 companies which need to be looked at for voting, you really can't do it as let's say a mutual fund or any institutional shareholder. So proxy advisors are able to kind of focus the attention, analyze it, and kind of put it out there for institutional investors and also retail investors. I think these three are put together, are making a massive impact on corporate governance issues.
Okay. Hi, Sandeep and Hetal. This is Mubina as well joining in. Sandeep, my question is to you. Yes, you rightly mentioned that today there's a plethora of information. There's clarity. Voices like IiAS are, putting things into perspective, for the minority shareholders. Institutional investors have always had the power to be very vocal and, voice their opinions, have their opinions being heard. But do you think that today the regulatory environment, the rules brought forward by SEBI in the last couple of years have also made it more conducive for the minority investors' voice as well to be heard?
Yes, I think so. I think not just in terms of just the bandwidth of enforcement actions, but also in terms of kind of an cultural shift with the regulator. I think there's been, if you recall, just I think 4 or 5 years back, SEBI started the forensic cell of enforcement. So that itself has had a big impact on financial disclosures and even fraud. So I would think that a lot of changes have occurred uh, from the perspective of SEBI, which earlier would focus typically on intermediaries and not so much on listed companies. This whole changes. The trend will continue for in the times to come.
Hetal, just looking at some of the cases, one case in point is IDFC, where the shareholders are saying that why has there been such an inordinate delay in the whole value unlocking process. Now, I understand in cases where you question the remuneration, that a director takes home, etc., where it's, quantitative factor and you can compare it with the profits, etc., and say that, the profit or the loss that the company is posting is not justifying the remuneration. Those kind of issues are simple, especially when you can quantify it. But when you say that why has there not been value unlocking, in a way you're also questioning that why the market has not ascribed a certain value to the stock, which the promoters may have sort of promised when they undertook a certain exercise. This could be a little more judgmental and qualitative in nature. Do you see room for such questions as well being raised, by shareholders, and them being suitably answered by companies, Hetal?
I think capital allocation questions have always been raised by investors. I think that has been the forefront of most of the conversation that investors have had with companies in terms of performance, in terms of capital allocation, business strategy. And these, even the case of IDFC, is really what investors see as the primary focus, or saw as the primary focus for a long time. In IDFC specific case, I think the entire value proposition of IDFC, and investors have been saying this for a long time, is that if they unlock the value and sort of, if they're able to unlock the value of the mutual fund business. It's not happened for a long time. This was an expectation which management had also given investors, and therefore investors are raising this question. But questions around strategy and where the company is going and what is the direction is par for course. I think over a period of time, what we've seen investors' questions morph into is more focus on ESG elements, right? What is the governance structures first? Because again, like you said, a lot of the data is available, and a lot of the decision making emanates from having stronger governance structures. But also conversations around what the companies are doing on the environmental and social aspects. So, pay parity, the whole piece around Puneet Goenka's compensation, where employees get nothing and Puneet Goenka gets 46%, is also an element of that. So I think this is how investors are now broad-basing their questions and looking at the companies more holistically, which is also compelling companies to behave in a certain manner and look at their own sort of responsibility to the ecosystem in a better manner.
Okay. Well, Hetal as well as Sandeep, we leave it at that. Thanks so much for joining us today on ET Now. To both of you for doing your bit as well on sort of encouraging better governance practices, and for in areas where it's not being practiced, for assisting investors, minority and otherwise, in raising their voice.